Today my supervisor sent me home from work because I refused to give her a hug. Reddit. What's the most unprofessional or petty thing you have experienced or witnessed at work? My boss doesn't believe in sick days. For herself or anyone else. So she came in all last week with a terrible cold laryngitis. This week 3 other people have a terrible cold laryngitis. Sick days aren't meant for fun times, they're meant to prevent the spread of contagious illnesses. She's such a goddamn idiot. I need a new job. I work in a restaurant and called in sick due to a bad cold and fever today. My boss spent 20 minutes on the phone with me trying to convince me that I wasn't endangering anybody. I need a new job. At the last company I worked for, the vice president was a lesbian. She would sometimes get really drunk at lunch and come back to the office. Once when she did this, she called me in for a meeting, at which time she told me to sit next to her and put her hand on my thigh while telling me about all the potential I had with the company. But to top this off, the conference room had glass walls so everyone walking by could see what was going on. One of those people happened to be her girlfriend, who had showed up to drop off something to her. It was beyond awkward. I showed a coworker a video of my new kitten. Next thing I know, I'm in an office being scolded and told I should have known better, as well as having my professionalism questioned. Apparently someone walking by recently had their cat pass away and felt the need to complain. Now if I want to show a video at work, I have to have it approved by management first. I worked as a head lifeguard at a water park. We had a minor situation where a kid who couldn't swim jumped into the deep end. The lifeguard of that area went in to get her. No big deal. Happens a lot. My boss, the park supervisor, heard the whistle blow, ran over full speed and jumped in with the non-waterproof radio among other important items. I let her know she didn't need to do that I had it under control. She replied that I should never tell her she is wrong and sent me home for the day. I've worked for my company for almost 2 years and I haven't used any vacation leave. I decided to treat myself to a 4-day weekend. I took Thursday and Friday off. Thursday morning my boss calls me like 4 times. I'm so annoyed because I wanted to sleep in. I answer it the 5th time she calls. She's begging me not to read the email she sent me when I get to the office on Monday. She said she wrote it while she was feeling mean-spirited and felt like bullying me. Can't wait to forward it to HR when I go back to work tomorrow. Please keep us posted. Seriously, I have to know. Edit. I don't feel let down. I'm too elated that OP actually delivered. At a part-time job I had eons ago, the boss would come in and flip through P magazines while we were talking. It was slightly awkward. I responded by putting up a mildly pornographic calendar and praising the virtues of the young ladies featured. He assumed I was a lesbian and left me alone after that. I work and direct patient care in a psychiatric facility when one of my co-workers suddenly called a patient a W. Yelled it right in her face in front of myself and other staff. I wrote her up because I don't think it was right. Fast forward a few weeks, and this co-worker finds out that I was one of the people who complained and has been passive-aggressive with her comments and glares at me. She's been trying to get a friend of mine who used to work with us to harass me into changing my story. It hasn't happened though. There have been whispers that I have heard about throwing people under the bus. I had previously on several occasions talked to this person about her language, attitude and behavior. I was told by her that it wasn't my job to do this. I have gone to my boss and informed them. I have been made to feel like I'm the one that did something wrong. Frick me right? I don't think that someone suffering a psychotic break should be called names in a professional environment. You did the right thing. Good for you. I'm being fired tomorrow for making an hour complaint against my director. I guess meetings with HR aren't confidential as I was told. HR is there to protect the company, not you. If the problem is unlikely to result in a lawsuit or EOC finding, then the easiest thing to do is get rid of the employee. It's cynical, but I've seen it more than a few times. My old manager used to flip out and give you a crappy schedule the following week if you brought in food for yourself and none for him. He also used to write F on my back in ranch dressing because I decided to stop seeing a girl we worked with. We were cooks. The girl was a waitress. This then exploded into World War III when myself and another co-worker dosed him with water and flour. The manger started pouring full 3-liter jugs of BBQ sauce at us. He also used to write F on my back in ranch dressing. It's rare that I get to encounter something I had literally never considered to be possible before. My last boss utterly convinced himself that I had made up an ailment so that I could skive off work. I had a minor operation to remove an axillary abscess, but it required nearly 2 months of aftercare by means of a nurse pulling the dressing out of the hole and then restuffing the cavity, which would generally only take a half hour out of the working day as the doctor's surgery was just down the road, and I managed to get most of my appointments during my lunch hour. So despite having a whopping big bandage taped under my arm and across my shoulder that was visible under my clothing, he'd make snide comments and refer to my appointments with bunny fingers. And worst of all, he would pop out for 5 minutes just before I was due to get a dressing change. It was a small business, so one person had to be there. So I'd miss my appointment and have to go grovel to the nurses because they had to deal with me after hours. There was just not 1 ounce of empathy in that guy. I feel so sorry for whoever had to take over my role when I left. He would pop out for 5 minutes just before I was due to get a dressing change. It was a small business, so one person had to be there. So I'd miss my appointment and have to go grovel to the nurses because they had to deal with me after hours. First 2 times, I'd talk to him about it. 3rd time, I'd leave on time and lock the building up behind me. One of my former managers got an employee to quit because she wouldn't sleep with him. Gradually gave her less and less hours until she couldn't deal with 2 days a week anymore. I used to work at a bar that sold flavored shots and beer. Around 8 people worked there, 2 per shift, and I was one of the best. My boss didn't bother to arrange shifts, so his much younger and much more inexperienced friend did that for him. She'd had a thing for my boyfriend, who also worked there, for years now, and she didn't really try to hide it. He worked almost every day. I was called in once a week. After a month, they hardly ever called, and although I was never officially fired, that bee did get rid of me. I hope she gets eaten by boars. I'm a unit secretary at a hospital. Typically I'm the one that gets the call when we have a new patient coming to the floor. Since we are always understaffed, a new patient is always a call for bitching. And guess who gets blamed? The other day one of the nicest nurses lost her crap and started berating me because she was going to get her 8th patient. I don't make bed assignments. She knows that. Still, I'm the one who has to absorb the screaming. This was after my supervisor chewed me out because her supervisor had me helping out on the floor because we only had 1 nurse aide for 22 patients. And it was only 2 hours into my 12-hour shift. I cry at work every day. Internet hug. Reading this thread has made me very depressed because I only have crappy jobs, it seems. Here's some key moments throughout the years. I can give more details if anyone wants them. I had an employer call me and another worker into his office. Apparently there was a big mistake made on one of the client's forms. The client was mine, but I didn't recognize the handwriting on that particular form, nor did I have any recollection of making any arrangements with him. The other employee confesses that he had filed it for me, without my knowledge, and had clearly messed it up. He told our boss it was entirely his mistake, and that he was sorry to both me and the boss. My boss responded by telling me I was being sent home and to spend the extra time thinking about what I had done. The other employee, who looked shocked, was told he was okay and to get back to work. I spent my extra time looking for a new job and quit the next day. Worked at a fast food place run by a husband and wife. I lasted 2 days. On my first day I got backed into a corner by the husband, who was poking me in the chest and yelling because I put a piece of trash in the wrong trash can. On the second day I was helping the wife with something in her office when the husband bursts in and just starts screaming at her in Hindu. Thus I have no idea what was said, and shoving his finger into her chest. Scared out of my mind I was able to spurt out I seem to be in the way right now. Should I come back later? The wife responded by snapping at me that from now on I need to mind my own business and keep my ears shut when her husband and her are talking. I never came back. Cashier job. Got to work. My register is frozen. I call the boss over to see if he knows what happened to it, and without ever actually listening to me assumes that I broke it doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing. He calls me a useless idiot. in front of a bunch of customers and just yells a lot in Spanish, not letting me explain myself. Finally a customer steps in and says, "Man, maybe she would work better for you if you were nicer to her." To which he responded that she's just stupid. There's no fixing that. Oh wait, but that isn't the worst part. By this point I'm crying out of humiliation but too shocked to actually quit and run from the building. By the time he's done with his ranting and yelling, I am just stunned and unable to babble out that I really think it best if I go home for the day and we talk about it when he's calmer. He then says if I leave I won't have any job to come back to. I needed that job and he knew it. I worked the rest of my shift and sadly continued working there for another month before I finally quit. And keep my ears shut when her husband and her are talking. What the frick? He then says if I leave I won't have any job to come back to. That man is a piece of crap. Got pneumonia. Got put on antibiotics which it turned out I was allergic to. Experienced anaphylaxis. So spent the nights in hospital and couldn't come into work. My boss was the kind who would rather people come into work sick than not work. So he was displeased. I missed 4 more days. On the second day he called me up asking if there was something he should know about that is. Thinking I was missing work because of partying or something. I said no. He said I needed a note for every single day I missed. So each day I had to pull myself out of bed and go to a walk-in clinic to get a doctor's note. Here in Canada you have to pay for the doctor's notes. But the doctor was just like, WTF. Your boss is a douche and would give me the note for free each day. The day before I returned, my boss emailed me saying that I was missing an average of 1/4 workday, having missed 5 days for that month, and that sort of absenteeism was unacceptable. Blah blah blah. Revoked my right to sick days. And from then on until I left the company a year later, I had to call his cell phone when I arrived in the office to timestamp that I had arrived and prove I wasn't being a crappy employee if I didn't call by like 9:01. For example, if my phone was ringing off the hook when I arrived, he would start calling my cell phone texting me angrily. TLDR. Got pneumonia. Had anaphylaxis. Missed work and boss thought I was faking it and made me get a new doctor's note for each day. Used bad statistics to say I miss an average of 25% of work and revoked my sick days. Made me call his cell phone first thing in the morning upon returning to prove that I was actually in the office. My bosses gave everyone a copy of the schedule that had all the names of the workers. We were told to choose 3 people who we thought should be laid off. I gave them back the list and told them that they didn't hire me to make those types of decisions for them. 2 days later as I was coming into work I was stopped at the door by one of the owners. He told me that Survivor Council has convened and that I had been voted off the island. Yeah, you're fired. I had worked there for over a year, and to be dismissed like it was a freaking game was pretty ridiculous. I would have either circled or written in the names of the managers. Was working for a small business and was repeatedly asked to use my own personal car to make deliveries and pick up supplies. I eventually told the owner that I didn't feel comfortable using my personal vehicle for company work. My statement was polite and voiced my concerns of only having liability insurance on it and having to pay for all the gas on my own too. The owner was like, "How many miles did you drive yesterday? Maybe 3. Here's 75 cents. That's average mileage pay." And he dropped 3 quarters into my hand. I looked at the change in my hand, then looked up at him, then back at the change in my hand and they were diamonds. Just kidding. I threw the quarters on the ground as I looked at him and said, "I don't want your change." Then I quit and told him to shove it. I threw the quarters on the ground and I was 15. First day working at a small skate shop. I am a girl. By the way, my boss was 20 something. I know he had graduated college and this was a summer job. While I was reaching to grab something from a top shelf, he came over and smacked my butt. I asked him quietly to please not do that again, and he told me that this was his store and that I was lucky to have a job. I quit and called my mom. Unfortunately we had a family vacation the next week and I decided not to bother with pressing charges or telling the boss, though I probably should have. You. Not cool. Glad you were wise enough to quit. Could have gotten weirder. I had an asthma attack at work and had to be taken to the hospital by ambulance because I was unconscious. 2 weeks later, The operations manager was working there and the first thing she said to me was, "You better not have one of those asthma attack shoots when I'm here," and then refused to put my new inhaler into the safe in the office where they always keep it. Dong, but still I would want my inhaler on me when I had an asthma attack. Most people don't know what to do and just freak out. Report it to HR during your exit interview. Let them know that you know it blows right past the threshold of hostile work environment and get them running a little scared. Forget about suing for SH. Those cases are extremely difficult to win. You may get a settlement after years of waiting and legal fees, but nothing will happen to the perpetrator, and you will get a professional reputation as a troublemaker. The bad guys usually win in this world, and that's a fact. I work in dialysis. Apparently right before I was hired, one of the patients started slurring her words and was completely incoherent because her blood pressure was dangerously low. A tech reported it to a nurse, who I've been told is a Christian nut job, and asked what they should do, and the nurse replied, "Nothing, she's speaking in tongues, she'll be fine," and refused to treat the patient. I removed my manager from my Facebook a few months back and she told everyone at work and asked me to re-add her. I removed her because out of the 2 years that I've worked there, I was late once because of a car accident that happened directly in front of me. When I called to let her know I had to give my statement to the police, she told me it was unacceptable and I need to be more professional. Note, that's still the only time I've ever been late and I have never called in sick. But my co-worker comes in late at least twice a week. Cool story. Never add a boss on FB. Also, never add a co-worker unless you know them outside of work. My previous job, my boss told me that I needed to go to church, and they were concerned because no one ever saw me say grace when eating lunch in my cubicle. She and others in the office would constantly nag me about Christian stuff. It got so bad that I would avoid conversations with many folks there because it always led to Jesus. They ended up firing me for petty reasons and I've lawyered up. I am a sous chef, and while I am very good at dealing with the pressure of line cooking, been doing it for 5 years, I had a crappy day after working 15-hour shifts for the previous week. So I left early. That is to say, I arrived at 5 AM and left at 7:30 PM because our breakfast and lunch cook flaked on us. In response to me leaving early, my boss went on the restaurant's Facebook and proceeded to write a bunch of nasty things about me, using my name and posting comments under articles written about me and what a great addition I made to the restaurant. She said things like, "Regurgi quit today, stomping out of the kitchen like a spoiled princess. Hope she took her tiara and high heels with her," and, "Some people just aren't cut out to be cooks. They need to stop watching the Food Network and think anyone can cook a line right out of school." Yet, I worked my way up from washing dishes 10 years ago to cooking a line for the past 5 years to working as sous chef for this particular place. That is the thanks I got for working 80 hours a week for a month and a half helping this restaurant in their opening week. Whoa, frick your boss. I used to go to a Christian private school. Our athletic director used to be principal of a separate public school. He'd tell everyone who got sent to his office for doing something wrong that they needed to accept Jesus, etc., etc. Finally, he got fired from teaching at public schools for throwing a stapler at a kid who told him that religion is stupid. How he evaded being arrested, I have absolutely no clue, but holy crap did I hate that man. At one of the private Christian schools I went to, we weren't allowed to wear jean jackets to school because the principal hated denim. I worked for an employer where a supervisor was behaving inappropriately towards a female co-worker. She noticed that I witnessed his advances and inappropriate touching, so she asked for my help. I mentioned it to him and was blown off, so I brought it to his boss, whom said it was a non-issue. We ended up taking it to the general manager, who sent me home saying that my conduct was unprofessional. I was fired the next morning. The offending supervisor was deported a few days later for being an undocumented immigrant when the call center was raided by immigration. From the description you may think it was some horrible boiler room marketing company, but it was Axe Xerox, the same company that manages call centers across the country handling everything from student loans collections for the federal government to customer service calls for major companies. So yes, I guess it was some horrible boiler room marketing company. Well, One time my supervisor complained that I was using the wrong kind of tape to make a label. I had made hot chocolate mix and just had to put a piece of tape on the container listing the contents, the date it was made, and my initials. Usually we use clear packing tape and write on it with a Sharpie. One day, I couldn't find the packing tape, so I just used Scotch tape. The next day she informed me that I used the wrong tape and said not to let it happen again. My favorite, though, is when I accidentally made a drink with all skim milk instead of half skim half whole milk. The customer said she didn't have a problem with it, but my manager actually yelled at me. The only reason it happened in the first place was that this girl wrote the order up wrong and blamed it on me. I tried to stay calm and said it wouldn't happen again, and I heard her mutter under her breath, "Yeah, it will." I quit about 3 weeks later. Once I was working on stock day, and although stock still needed to be put away, the employees that were scheduled to get off wanted to leave. I asked them if they would stay and help put away stuff, but the one employee was whining that he wanted to leave, and I was really irritated with his whining. So I went ahead and let him clock out and go. I walked back into the office to get something, and my boss, who was sitting at the computer putzing around, says to me, "Is stock put away yet?" I said number. The employees that were scheduled to leave left, so I have to do it myself. And he flipped his crap. "What do you mean they left? I thought I told you to tell those employees to stay." So I said, if they're scheduled to get off, I can't force them to stay. None of them wanted to stay to help. It's not my fault they were only scheduled until 1. Then he pulls out this gem. "I'm sick of your freaking bulls." I left the office. Then, a couple of hours later, he asks me if stock is done again. I was freaking pissed off, so I said, "Mostly, but I can't put the sodas away because I can't reach the top shelf. Keep in mind these are 50-pound syrups. I have trouble lifting them." And he says to me, instead of offering his help, "Get a stool." I am so glad he no longer works there. Stock day where I work includes carrying relatively heavy items up a relatively unstable ladder on your own before putting them away in a 4 feet tall room. Good luck getting that past health and safety. I share your pain, Darina. I had a nurse supervisor who would take advantage of my being a nice person but having me pick up her breakfast every day in the cafeteria, since I was going over there for myself. Every day, she was lazy and I was being taken advantage of. So one day I decided I wasn't going to do. When she came to bring me her money, I politely told her that I wasn't buying that morning. It turned into an argument to the point of where she cried and I said, "Fine, gimme your money, whatever, I'll go get your breakfast." She walked away. Later, I was called into the director's office and she said I should have just got the breakfast for her. WTH. A girl I work with does this to me. I basically have to sneak out to go to lunch so she can't stop me. Luckily she's going to be fired at the end of the month for being incompetent. When I was 16, the manager at a pizza place used to let me stay clocked in hours after I was needed. We would sit in his office and he would ask me uncomfortable questions, and I would avoid the answers, happily taking the extra money it was giving me. I only realized later how fricked up that is. My boss had to gather the entire staff together to talk about how one employee felt as though he wasn't friends with anyone. I swear to God, I hated him even more after that. Or perhaps you were all genuinely harassing or being dongs to him if you claim to have hated him before that. At my old position at the company I work at, I was what they call the AAA loader. Essentially, I had to load these grafts that go into your aorta into their delivery system, and if they were loaded incorrectly they could seriously hurt or even kill somebody. Because of that, for every 2 loaders you had a quality control person. Well, this was in my second to last day as a loader. I had been promoted to an office job and was going to start the next week, and the QC I had was somebody who wasn't exactly popular. Instead of keeping an eye out on the work, he tended to doodle on post-it notes, and in general was pretty annoying. However, this day was different. I'm loading my graft, and I made a mistake when I passed it to him to inspect the system. Now, he checks it by tugging on a wire to make sure it's secure, but the thing was I forgot to set a screw to keep the wire in place. If he had been properly checking the product, when he went to tug on it he would have pulled the wire out, except that when he tugged on the wire it did not move a millimeter. At this point I'm tired of his incompetence, because if he can't pull an unsecured wire out, which is not hard to do, then how is he actually checking to make sure the product is good? At this point, even though I know I wasn't going to be there too much longer, I decided to tell my section leader and his section leader, and he gets a stern talking to about doing his work correctly. This is where it gets stupid. The rest of the afternoon he's seething in anger over the fact that I called out his crappy workmanship, while I'm just trying to get the day done. At one point, I pass my product over to have him inspect it, and he clearly ignores me. When I ask him, "Are you going to check it?" he goes, "I'll get to it when I get to it." I go back to my section leader, and he comes over and asks if we need to be separated. I'm like, "Look, I don't care who I'm working with, I'm just trying to get the day done," while he keeps being a bee about the whole thing. Eventually, the day is over, and he warns the QC I had the next day that I was in a crappy mood. The next day I was probably as happy as could be. I really hope he got fired at one point, or at least put into a position where he can't do any harm. Those were life-altering products we worked with, for good or bad. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.